Ben McKee, West Rucker here with our full court press following Tennessee's 74-56 win over Georgia Southern, a Georgia Southern basketball team that is now 0-10. Tennessee now 7-3 on the season. Technically Tennessee won, West, but doesn't quite feel like a win, as weird as that sounds, because Tennessee did not play well in the second half, and Rick Barnes was not happy with the effort by specifically his older guys not named Jonas Adu.
Yeah, I think to me it's more of a mild annoyance than an actual problem. You're sitting here in the middle of fall semester final exams. They put that game to bed at halftime. You would like to think that everybody takes every game so seriously and intently, and you should. You absolutely should. But what happened in the second half, I mean, it's annoying. He'll have them run a little bit. They'll probably get the message. I just don't think it's a huge deal, but the fact that it was a couple of the upperclassmen is what makes it a little more concerning. You would like to think that some of the guys he's had to call out at times this season are not the names that you would want him to have to be calling out, and guys who have been here for a long time and know the expectations of this place, this program as well as anyone does. So that part is concerning, but overall the second half, I mean, I'm not making too much of it, but it's not great.
Yeah, it's not great, but it's also probably not going to happen again. But we also did just have several conversations about how Tennessee played in the first half at North Carolina in a very similar fashion. And you would think with this older group, again, not named Jonas Adu, he is excluded from this conversation tonight because he was fantastic, and We'll get to him in a moment. But your core that's been around now, fifth-year seniors, like this should not be popping up from time to time. It does happen, but it also shouldn't be happening.
It shouldn't be happening, and there were a couple of interesting things about tonight. I mean, I think everybody on all sides knew what kind of game this was going to be, and so Barnes, played some freshmen more in the first half too, and he mixed some things up. He played different rotations, a couple of two big men rotations that they've only played with recently, and some new faces as those tandems out there. So they do that stuff in practice all the time, so it's not that big of a deal, but it is a little bit different. There were a couple of different little things about tonight, but overall, I mean, they got the job done in the first half. The game was over. This was never going to be a loss. But yes, the fact that it was some of those veterans is not what you want to hear, but just nip it in the bud, take it seriously, get it done with now, and that way we're not having this conversation in 2 or 3 months.
Absolutely. And speaking of Jonas Adu, as we've mentioned a couple times, he was phenomenal tonight. Career high, 29 points, great at the free throw line, double-double with 11 rebounds, I believe 7 offensive rebounds. He was just terrific and continues to, I mean, outside of Dalton Connect, he's been Tennessee's best player this season. He's
been really, really good. And, there were a lot of eyebrows kind of furled and a lot of interesting looks and thoughts and words and people saying things. When Rick Barnes came out in Chapel Hill and said what he said about Jonas Adu, about how this offense can go through Jonas Adu, he can be one of the best big men in the country. There was nothing empirically on paper at that point to suggest that was a thing that was likely, right? But those of us who have been around the program, who know what Jonas Adu is capable of, I think we thought it was more possible than other people did, but we should because we see them more. But he's still gone out there and done it and backed up those comments. And sometimes people say that Barnes can be a little bit too harsh on some of these guys. He comes out really without a lot of evidence to support it and says what he says about Adu, and then Adu goes on a big run. So it kind of gets back to that. Sometimes if you pump your guys up a little bit, you can get results out of it. Sometimes honey works too.
Yeah, absolutely. And lastly, the other positive from tonight, aside from winning, is the young guys. Several of those freshmen got in, didn't play as much. Rick Barnes talked about being disappointed they didn't play as much because the veterans did not handle business at the start of the second half. But he said he did like the preparation from Freddie DeLeon, Cameron Carr, and those other freshmen coming into the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of years in the Tennessee program. I would say a majority of them recently, even during the Barnes era with some of those talented teams. More often than not, freshmen like that would be on the floor a good bit more. It's just this team is deep, and this team has a lot of veterans on. A couple guys came back. Maybe they were going to leave. Maybe they didn't. They came back. And then you brought in a couple old transfers. So this is an old team that's got a lot of veterans on it. And so you're not going to need them as much if things go according to plan in a lot of games. And so I'll be interested to see how they handle that, how they develop throughout the season, because they're good enough to play. They absolutely are. Are they better options than the veterans on the floor? If all things are equal, no, they're not. But they're really, really talented players who I think could have really nice careers here. So if they continue doing the hard work, if they continue impressing, they're going to wrestle their way out there because they're good enough to do it.
Absolutely. Tennessee now heads off to San Antonio, where they'll play NC State on Saturday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, late night tip-off. So make sure you're drinking plenty of energy drinks or coffee.
Yes.
He's Wes Rucker. I'm Ben McKee.